Chapter 7. The Robot Story. None of the cows could believe that this monster, this robot, this machine had just spoken to them in the animal language. They stared at her, nervously shifting in their stalls, wondering what she would do next. What Roz did next was simple. She told the truth. She stood in the middle of the barn and she shared her story with the herd. I spent most of my first year of life on a remote wild island, Roz began. I did not know how to get there. I only knew that I wanted to survive. So I studied the island's animals to see how they survived. And a surprising thing happened. Their sounds and movements started making sense to me. I was learning the language of animals. Even when I could speak with them, the animals wanted nothing to do with me. But that changed when I discovered an orphaned gosling. The poor thing would have died on his own, so I cared for him and adopted him as my son, and his name is Brightbill. A murmur spread through the herd. When the animals saw me caring for Brightbill, they finally accepted me. I was no longer alone. I had friends and a family and a home, and life was good. Until the Rico robots arrived. They came in their sleek white airship to take me away, and when I resisted, they became violent. Until the Rico robots arrived. They came in their sleek white airship to take me away, and when I resisted, they became violent. The animals defended me, and they fought bravely, and they destroyed the Ricos. But I was badly damaged in the fighting. I needed repairs, and I could not get them on the island. So the animals loaded my broken body into the airship, and it took me far away from my home. Lily, the calf, poked her head through the railing and said, "What about Brightbill?" "My son is smart and tough, and he is a good flock," said Roz. "I think he will be okay without me." "Where were you taken?" said Tess. "I was taken back to the factory where I was made. The factory is run by a crew of robot workers called the Makers, and when I arrived, they put me in a room filled with other broken robots. Some robots were pretty ruined, and the Makers immediately sent them away. But those of us with working computer brains were given a test." "What kind of test?" said Lily. "The Makers simply asked us questions. They asked us how we became damaged. They asked us how would we respond in different emergencies. They asked us to identify certain sounds and smells and objects. Robots who answered every question correctly were repaired. All the others were destroyed. In the wilderness, I camouflaged my body to survive. So in the robot factory, I camouflaged my personality to survive. I pretended I was a perfectly normal robot. I did not say that I had adopted a goose, or that I could speak with the animals, or that I had resisted the Ricos. I said what I had to say to pass the test. And it worked. "Good for you, Roz," said Tess, and all the other cows smiled. The Makers shut me off, and when I woke up, my body was fixed, and I was on this farm. And now, like all of you, I belong to Mr. Sharif. The cows stopped smiling. Everyone was quiet, and then Annabelle spoke up. "I was taken from my families and friends too," she said. "They're back on the farm where I was born. I still think about them every day." "It is difficult to be apart from the ones that we love," said the robot. "You know, Roz, things could be worse," said Tess. "At least on this farm, you'll be surrounded by nature." "Yes, things could be worse." The robot's eyes brightened a little. "But I am not safe here. If any human ever learns who I really am, they would have me destroyed. And that is why, when the time is right, I will try to escape. Chapter 8. The Computer. Inside the barn, the lights were low and the sounds were hushed, and the night slowly wore on. A few cows were chewing hay, but most of them were resting peacefully. Our robot had returned to her corner. The soft glow of the computer screen lit up her face as she studied farming. She learned about the herd, and the pasture and the fields, and about the native plants and the wildlife, about the seasons and the climate and the weather, about machines and buildings and fences, and all the tools and all the dairy equipment. Every detail was perfectly remembered in Roz's robot computer brain. In a single night, Roz became a farmer. Chapter 9. The First Day. At dawn, the cows began to stir. One by one, they walked out the side door, across the muddy barnyard, into the parlor for a quick milking before heading down to the pasture. They followed the same route every morning like clockwork. However, on this morning, the cows were joined by a robot. With her computer brain full of farming knowledge, Roz was ready for her first day on the job. She stomped through the tall, wet grass, and her head slowly turned as she scanned the scenery. The sun was rising, the fog was lifting, the cows were grazing, but then the whole world seemed to flip upside down. Before Roz knew what was happening, she was on her back, looking up at the sky. A strong smell filled the air. Our robot had slipped on cow dung. The herd erupted in laughter. Tess called out, "Ha! Welcome to the Hilltop Farm, Roz," which brought another round of snorts and moos. "You'll have to get used to the cow patties and to the laughter," said old Annabelle as she strolled over. "Not much happens around here, so we're always eager to laugh." "I understand," said Roz. "I like laughing too." And she forced out a very awkward ha, ha, ha. Then the robot stood up, wiped her feet, and continued exploring the farm. But she was more careful where she walked. The fields and buildings and fences were all in need of Roz's attention. But her most urgent task was to fix the broken farm machines. The herding machine was designed to roll through the pasture and look after cows as they grazed. But it had gotten stuck in the mud, and it was becoming a popular hangout for birds. The field machine was gigantic, like a house on wheels. It was designed to roam the fields, planting and fertilizing and harvesting the feed crops. But it had ground to a halt weeks ago, and now was just collecting dust in a far corner of the property. The drone was a small flying machine with a special camera attached to its underside. It was designed to fly above the farm and keep an eye on the whole place. But it came crashing down when a mob of crows attacked it in flight. Other broken machines were hidden in clumps of weeds, and still more were waiting for repairs in the shed. The peaceful morning was suddenly jolted by the sound of power tools as Roz began fixing machines. Thanks to her robot strength and her smarts, she made excellent progress. A few hours flew by and the machines were rumbled back to life, and the farm began buzzing with activity. At sunset, Rambler came bouncing down the driveway with the Sheriffs in the front and Oscar in the back. "How's it going, Roz?" said Mr. Sheriff, leaning out the window. The children giggled and waved from their seats, and the dogs sniffed in the breeze. "It's going well," said Roz in her very robot voice. "Many of the machines are working again." "I see that." Mr. Sheriff gazed up at the drone circling high overhead. "We thought we'd come out to check on you, but it looks like you're doing fine, so we'll stay out of your way. Keep up the good work, Roz." And the truck started rolling up the driveway. Oscar looked back and barked at Roz. "You smell like cow patties," he barked. And he was right. The robot was filthy. She had finished her first day as a farmer by scrubbing herself with soap and water. Chapter 10. The Routine. Reader, I don't want to bore you with every detail about our robot's farm routine. Many of her tasks were incredibly dull, while others were quite unpleasant. I'll just say that on any given day, Roz might have to be a mechanic, or a veterinarian, or a gardener, or a plumber, or a cleaner, or an electrician, or all of the above. Farm life kept Roz very busy indeed. Of course, she did have some help. You already know about some of the machines, but the entire farm was equipped with technology that made life easier for everyone. Doors and gates opened automatically, and the cows wore electronic collars that kept track of their health automatically. When a cow's udders were full, she simply had to stroll into the parlor, where she'd be milked by gentle machines automatically. All that milk was piped into storage tanks, and it was cooled and bottled automatically. Once the milk truck was loaded up, it drove away and it made its deliveries automatically. Mr. Sharif managed his business side of the farm. He dealt with the customers, handed them money, and ordered supplies. And he did it all from the comfort of his home office. Now that he had a robot to do all the farm work, he hardly even ever left the house. Roz was more content than she ever expected to be. Most of her time she spent outdoors with animals under the wide-open sky. Even while laboring in the field, she could always stop to smell the flowers and look up at the clouds and feel the cool air drifting out from the trees. And yet Roz was living two lives. When she had the farm to herself, she could play with the calves, or run through the grass, or chat with the wildlife. But whenever their Sharifs were near, Roz had to pretend to be a normal robot. She could never ever let them know who she really was. Chapter 11. The Stragglers. Wild geese are known for migrating in the autumn and in the spring. But exactly when the flock migrates is up to its members. Some flocks choose to fly in the season, others straggle far behind. And it was one of those straggling flocks that caught the attention of our robot. Honk, honk, honk. The geese were heard before they were seen. Their honking voices echoed across the farm, and then the flocks disappeared behind the hills just to appear above the fields. Flying in a wobbly V formation, they glided over the pasture and they plunked down into the pond. None of them were very concerned as Roz approached. The geese had seen similar creatures on other farms, and they knew they had nothing to fear. And they were about to learn that our robot was very different from others. "Hello, geese," said Roz. "Welcome to Hilltop Farm." The geese froze. They stared at Roz with suspicious eyes, and then the biggest goose slowly swam over. "I've come across plenty of monsters like you," he said, "but never one that could talk. I am not a monster, I am a robot. My name is Roz." The goose scratched his head. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Roz the robot," he said at last. "My name is Wingtip, and this is my flock." Roz gave a friendly wave, and soon the flock was gathered around, curious to meet this odd character. As you can imagine, the geese were shocked to learn that Roz had a goose for a son. They asked her all kinds of questions about Brightbill and about her old life on the island and about her new life on the farm. But then Roz asked them a question of her own. "Do you think Brightbill's flocks would ever come this way on their migration?" Doubtful," said Wingtip. "It sounds like his flock takes the eastern flyways, and they'd never come this far west." The robot slumped with disappointment. "However, we geese are full of surprises," said Wingtip. "I promise you this, Roz. If we ever meet Brightbill, we will point him in your direction." The talk was interrupted by giggling and barking. The children were taking their dog for a walk. Roz couldn't be seen chatting with a goose, so she whispered a quick goodbye to her friends and she went back to work. and when she looked down,